Hi everyone, Mr. Ambrose here today with your daily dose of sonnets. Today we'll be looking at Sonnet 17, and if you've been following along with our series on Shakespeare's sonnet series, you know that Shakespeare wrote the first 17 sonnets of his sonnet series as procreation sonnets. Basically, these are sonnets that are designed to convince his subject, the fair youth, to marry and have children, or procreate. This is the final of such procreation sonnets. He'll continue to talk about the fair youth for almost 100 more sonnets, but we see the sonnet series shift after today's sonnet. So this sonnet is quite significant, as it is the 17th and final of the procreation sonnets. As always, we'll read the sonnet, briefly talk about an analysis and commentary, and then I'll offer you an assignment for which I'd like you to write your own poem in the style of Shakespeare. Here we are, Sonnet 17. Who will believe my verse in time to come, if it were filled with your most high deserts? Though yet heaven knows it is but as a tomb which hides your life and shows not half your parts. If I could write the beauty of your eyes and in fresh numbers number all of your graces, the age to come would say, this poet lies, such heavenly touches never touched earthly faces. So should my papers yellowed with their age be scorned like old men of less than tongue? And your true right be termed a poet's rage, and stretched meter of an antique song. But were some child of yours alive that time, you should live twice, in it and in my rhyme. We see in Sonnet 17 that theme of mortality that Shakespeare often speaks about in the sonnet series, particularly in the procreation sonnets. What he's talking about here is, how are you going to be able to live forever? You could live forever, he said in an earlier sonnet, if I write about you in a poem. That would give you immortality. But remember, after he says that in Sonnet 15, he almost immediately contradicts himself. He says, that's not going to work. We need something better. And a big reason for that, well, it's the fact that no one is going to believe how great the fair youth is when they see it on the page. Years from now, when those papers are yellowed, say 400 years after Shakespeare has died, like in the time period we live now, maybe, Shakespeare fears, people won't believe how beautiful the fair youth was. Shakespeare is the greatest writer of all time, so he can certainly describe someone's beauty in really rich and vivid ways. But even still, Shakespeare says no one is going to believe that such a beautiful person existed. Because what exists in that poem is just really a tomb, or like we might say, a shell of the existence. So basically, there are two reasons why Shakespeare is not going to be able to effectively put the fair youth into a poem. Number one, the poem is only a shell. The poem only shows half of what is the fair youth. And number two, the fair youth is so beautiful. If Shakespeare describes him, even if he describes him as effectively as possible, people will say, well, that's too good. No one could exist who is as beautiful as that. Kind of like a two-edged sword here. So basically, Shakespeare says the only way that the fair youth is going to be remembered is if he has a child. And then, if he has a child, down the line, it's essentially like the fair youth lives twice. In the child and in Shakespeare's poetry. So we see a really nice summary and ironic twist, as Shakespeare often offers, with that last final rhyming couplet. But were some child of yours alive that time, you should live twice, in it and in my rhyme. If the fair youth hopes to live on forever and achieve posterity, he should have children and be memorialized in a poem such as this. So we come to our assignment for tonight. And the assignment for tonight is to write about something that you think, no matter how well you write, you can never achieve the full scope of how beautiful it is. We say that all the time. We say all the time something was indescribable, or it was so great or so beautiful that words could not describe. Shakespeare says that about the fair youth, but he does attempt to describe him. I want to see if you can say that something is indescribable, and then give it a shot to best describe it. Could be a person, Could be a place, could be an object. This assignment will help us to transition to tomorrow's poem, Sonnet 18, as Shakespeare starts to compare the fair youth to a summer's day. I look forward to see what we come up with. Until next time, take care.